Section 1. The first rule we learned too late. The first rule was never written down. We learned it by watching people disappear. It started with the trees. I don't mean metaphorically. I mean the forest itself began changing subtly at first, like it was holding its breath. Branches leaned closer to the road than they used to. Paths we'd walked our entire lives narrowed overnight. And sometimes, when the wind died completely, you could swear the woods were listening. Everyone in town noticed. No one talked about it, because talking about things didn't stop them from happening. The disappearances came next one every few weeks. A hiker who never returned. A dog that slipped its leash and wasn't found, not even bones. Then people started vanishing closer to town. A jogger at dusk. A delivery driver whose truck was found idling on the shoulder. Door open, coffee still warm in the cup holder. No blood, no struggle, just absence. The sheriff called it animal attacks at first. Then exposure, then unfortunate accidents. Each explanation thinner than the last. But the thing that kept us awake at night wasn't the lies. It was the pattern. They never took people during the day. They never took more than one at a time. And they never left anything behind, except once. That was the night we learned the second rule. I was 17 when they found Mark Ellison's jacket. Mark was careful, paranoid, even. He never went into the woods without telling someone, never stayed out after sunset, and he definitely didn't drink. That made what happened to him harder to ignore. They found his jacket hanging from a low branch near the old logging trail. Not torn, not dirty, just placed, buttoned. Like someone had taken it off him gently and decided the tree needed it more. Inside the pocket was his phone, still on, still recording, no video, just audio, 6 minutes long. The first 2 minutes were Mark walking, breathing, talking to himself the way people do when they're nervous but pretending they aren't. The forest sounded normal, crickets, leaves, wind. Then came the pause. You can hear him stop walking, his breathing changes. There's a long stretch where no one says anything. Reposture, but you can feel it, like he's realized he's not alone. Then he whispers, "Hey, that's not a deer." The sound that follows doesn't translate well to words. It wasn't a growl, not exactly. More like something trying to remember how an animal is supposed to sound. Mark backs up. You can hear his foot slide against dirt. A branch snaps somewhere close, too close. "Hey," he says, voice shaking. "I'm leaving. I don't want any trouble." That's when the voice answers him. It sounds almost human, almost. "You already came." The recording ends with screaming. Not from pain, not right away, but from understanding. After that, the town changed overnight. Parents stopped letting kids walk home alone. Curfews became unspoken law. And the older folks, the ones who'd lived here before the other town even had a name, started locking their doors before sunset. That's when my grandfather finally told me the truth. "They hide," he said, staring out the window at the tree line. "They hunt, they eat." I laughed at first. I wish I hadn't. He didn't smile, didn't even look at me. Just kept watching the woods like he expected them to blink. "We used to know how to avoid them," he continued, "long time ago. But people got comfortable, forgot the rules." "What rules?" I asked. He finally turned to me. "If you hear someone call your name from the forest," he said slowly, "and you're sure no one should be there, don't answer." My stomach tightened. Why? Because they only use names after they've already picked you. That night, lying in bed, I heard something outside my window. A voice, low, familiar, calling my name. And that's when I understood the third rule. If they know who you are, it's already too late. Section 2, the sounds that shouldn't exist. The voice didn't stop when I covered my ears. It was the first thing, that was the first thing that scared me. It didn't shout. It didn't get closer. It just kept calling my name from the edge of the woods, calm and patient, like it knew time was on its side, like it knew I'd eventually slip up. "Evan," it said again, stretching the words slightly wrong. Too careful, like someone reading a name they'd never spoken aloud before. "Okay?" I stayed frozen in my bed, staring at the dark rectangle of my window. The curtains shifted gently, though there was no breeze inside the room. Outside, the forest stood perfectly still. No insects, no wind, no night sounds at all, just the voice. I remembered my grandfather's words and pressed my lips together until they hurt. Don't answer. Don't acknowledge. Don't move. Minutes dragged by. Each second felt like it was being peeled off my skin. My heart pounded so loud I was sure whatever was out there could hear it. I kept expecting the voice to get angry, to demand attention, to threaten me. It never did. Eventually, it stopped, not abruptly. It faded like it had decided it could wait. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, the town was buzzing with quiet panic. Everyone had heard something. Not the same voice, not the same words, but everyone had a story. Someone knocking on a back door at 3 a.m. Footsteps circling a house without ever approaching it. A child's laughter drifting through a closed window. Always at night, always just out of reach. The sheriff held a meeting at the fire hall. He stood under flickering fluorescent lights and told us to stay calm. To stay calm. To keep our doors locked. To avoid the woods after dark. He never once said the word creature. Never acknowledged the recordings people had started sharing in whispers. But we all saw his hands shaking. That afternoon, I went to see my grandfather again. He was packing not clothes, supplies, canned food, batteries, a weather radio. He moved with the urgency of someone who had been waiting for permission to panic. "They're closer than before," he said without looking at me. "Means they're hungry." "Who are they?" I asked. "What do they want?" He paused, then finally met my eyes. "They eat patterns," he said, "routine certainty. People who believe tomorrow will look like today." That answer sat wrong in my chest. Before I could ask more, a scream cut through the air outside, sharp, short, immediately silenced. We both froze. It came from the direction of the Miller house. We ran. A small crowd gathered at the edge of their property, keeping a wide distance from the trees that bordered the backyard. Mrs. Miller stood on the porch, sobbing into her hands. Mr. Miller stared at the forest, his face empty. Their daughter Lucy was gone. Her bedroom window was open. Muddy footprints led from the grass to the sill and stopped. No drag marks, no blood. Just impressions in the dirt, shaped like feet but wrong somehow. Too long. Too many joints. Someone said Lucy must have sleepwalked. No one believed them. That night, the rules changed. Lights stayed on in every house. People slept in groups. And no one, under any circumstances, responded to sounds from outside. For a while, it worked. Then came the fourth rule. They don't always come from the forest. I learned that one when my phone rang at rshta.m. The caller ID said Mom. My mother was asleep in the room down the hall. The phone rang again. I stared at it, every instinct screaming at me not to answer. The screen lit up my bedroom, casting shadows that didn't line up with the furniture. A voicemail notification appeared. I didn't press play. Outside, something scraped slowly along the side of the house. Not claws, fingers testing patient. From the hallway, I heard my mother stir. "Evan?" she called softly. "Did you hear that?" I opened my mouth to warn her. And from the other side of my bedroom door, her voice answered first. "Evan," it said gently. "It's okay. I'm right here." That was when I realized the most terrifying truth of all. They weren't just learning our names, they were learning us. In Section 3, the places between, the thing wearing my mother's voice didn't knock. It didn't need to. I stood perfectly still as its shadow slid beneath the crack of my bedroom door. The silhouette was wrong, too tall, shoulders bending inward like it had forgotten how bones were supposed to work. It leaned close enough that I could hear breathing that wasn't quite breathing, more like air being tasted. "You even," it whispered again, softer this time. Closer from down the hall, my real mother coughed in her sleep. That was the only reason I didn't break. I backed away slowly, step by careful step, until my calves hit the bed. My window was behind me. The forest waited beyond the glass, black and endless, but something told me outside was no safer than in. The handle of my door turned, just a fraction, then stopped. A sound followed, not frustration, not anger, curiosity. It sniffed. I don't know how long we stayed like that, me frozen at listening, but eventually the shadow retreated. Footsteps moved away, fading into silence. I collapsed onto the bed, shaking so hard my teeth rattled. Morning came like a lie. Sunlight spilled through the windows. Birds sang. The world pretended nothing was wrong. But half the town hadn't slept, and everyone knew it. By noon, another person was gone. This time it was old Mr. Hanley, found sitting upright in his armchair, eyes open, expression peaceful. No wounds, no signs of struggle. But his dog was missing. That was when my grandfather finally told me the rest. "They don't break in," he said, sharpening a knife that had never been used for cooking. "They wait for permission. Fear opens doors, familiarity opens them wider." "Then how do we stop them?" I asked. He looked tired, older than I'd ever seen him. "You don't fight them," he said. "You confuse them." That night we changed everything. We swapped bedrooms, slept in rooms we'd never used, answered each other with different names, covered mirrors, unplugged phones. We left radios playing static in empty rooms and set timers so lights turned on and off randomly. We broke our patterns. Outside, the sounds came again. Footsteps that circled but never approached. Voices that called the wrong names. Laughter that cut off mid-note like something realizing it had made a mistake. One night I saw one clearly. It stood at the edge of the tree line, half hidden behind a pine. Tall. Pale. Its face smooth and unfinished, like it hadn't decided what to be yet. When I moved, it tilted its head, confused. It took a step forward, then another, and then hesitation. It didn't cross the yard, it just watched. Days passed, then weeks. No one else vanished. The town didn't celebrate. We just endured. Boarded up houses stayed empty. People learned to live smaller, quieter lives. But we lived. Eventually, the sounds stopped. The forest grew noisy again. Wind returned. Crickets sang. Life, stubborn and loud, pushed back. One evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, my grandfather sat beside me on the porch. "They'll come back someday," he said calmly. "Maybe not in our lifetime, maybe not here." I nodded. I believed him. "But we'll remember," he continued. "And as long as people remember, they don't win." For the first time since it all began, I felt something warm settle in my chest. Hope. Because they hide. They hunt, they eat, but we learn, and that makes all the difference. Section 4. When the rules stopped working. The first sign that we were losing control was silence. Not the normal kind, the peaceful kind we'd learned to fear, but something hollow, like the world had stepped back and was waiting for instructions. The radio still hissed with static. Lights flicked on and off at random like we'd programmed. Doors stayed locked. Patterns stayed broken. And still something moved. I was awake when it happened. I always was by then. Sleep had become something I pretended to do, so my body wouldn't give out completely. I lay on my side, eyes open, counting breaths that didn't belong to me. 3 houses down, then 2. Then right outside. The sound wasn't footsteps anymore. It was weight shifting, slow, careful. Like whatever it was had finally learned how much pressure the ground could take before announcing it. I slid out of bed and crouched near the wall, pressing my ear against the cold plaster. The sound traveled, warped slightly by distance, then stopped directly beneath my window. No voice came this time. That scared me more than when it used my name. A scrape followed wood against fingernail, testing the siding, feeling for weakness. I held my breath. Across the hall, my grandfather's door creaked open. Just enough for me to see his silhouette. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. We both knew. The rules weren't enough anymore. The sound moved again, this time toward the back of the house, toward the kitchen, toward the door we never used. A soft click echoed through the dark, not a lock breaking, a lock opening. My stomach dropped. We'd changed our habits, broken routines, confused them. But we'd missed something. A gap so small we didn't think it mattered. We'd forgotten the door itself remembered. I moved before my fear could argue. I grabbed the flashlight from the floor, flicked it on, and swept the beam across the hallway. Shadows leapt. The radio in the spare room crackled louder, like it sensed motion. Then came the smell. Wet leaves, cold earth, something older underneath it. Rot and rain and hunger. The kitchen light snapped on. Oh, it stood just inside the doorway, not fully formed, not anymore. Its limbs bent the wrong way, extra joints where none should be. Its face wasn't blank now. It had chosen one. It looked like someone I almost recognized, stretched, thin and unfinished. Its mouth opened. I didn't wait to hear what it would say. I slammed the flashlight beam directly into its face. It recoiled, not in pain but surprise, like it hadn't expected resistance. That was enough. Ken, my grandfather, was already moving, shouting a name that wasn't mine. I shouted back with another. We collided in the hallway, hands gripping arms, grounding each other. Behind us, the thing stepped forward. The floor groaned. Too heavy, too fast, we ran. Not outside, never outside. We moved through the house erratically, rooms we didn't sleep in, doors we never opened, lights flipping on and off, in no pattern at all. The radio shrieked with static as we passed, drowning out the sound of pursuit. The thing followed, but slower now. Hesitant, it mimicked us poorly, limbs stuttering as it tried to adapt in real time. We reached the basement, and the door slammed behind us. I threw the bolt just as something hit the other side. Hard, curious, not angry. We backed into the darkness, breathing loud, hearts screaming. Above us it moved, not pacing, learning. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Time didn't behave right anymore. Then came the sound we'd hoped never to hear. It laughed, not correctly, not fully, but close enough to know it was practicing. The house creaked again, and then nothing. When we finally emerged at dawn, the door was untouched. No marks, no damage, just muddy footprints leading away from the house, toward town. That was when we understood the next rule. If they can't get you alone, they push you together. And towns make better meals. On Section 5, what survives the long night. The disappearances returned, but not the way they had before. They didn't take people from their homes anymore, not directly. Instead, they waited for mistakes. A light left on too long, a voice answered without thinking, a door opened for someone who looked almost right. The town shrank inward, people stopped trusting what they saw. Families slept in the same rooms. Neighbors moved together, traveled together, watched together. We stopped asking who someone was before letting them inside. We asked how they sounded. Still, it wasn't enough. One night, the power went out across the entire town. No lights, no radios, no static, just darkness and breathing. I was at the old fire station with a dozen others when we heard footsteps outside. Not circling, approaching. A voice called from the dark. Wrong voice, wrong tone, help me. No name this time. That was new. Someone shifted beside me. Fear rippled through the room like a held breath breaking. I grabbed the nearest arm and shook my head hard. No. The footsteps stopped, then multiplied. And shadows pressed against the boarded windows, stretching too tall, bending where glass should have been. Shaves passed in front of the moonlight that didn't match anything human. They were testing us again. We did the only thing left. We made noise. Not voices, not words. We slammed lockers, threw chairs, set off alarms manually, created chaos so loud and directionless it drowned intention. The creatures recoiled. Not fled, recoiled. Confusion rippled through the dark like a physical thing. One of them stepped forward and froze. Its head tilted sharply, as if listening for instructions that never came. Then another moved. Then another. They withdrew, not defeated, not gone, but uncertain. By morning, the forest sounded wrong again, too quiet, like before. But the town was still standing. Days passed. Then weeks. We learned faster than they did. We taught children early, taught them not to answer, not to assume, not to trust what wore familiar faces. We made the rules stories instead of warnings, because stories stick longer. The forest never returned to normal. It watches now. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear my name carried on the wind. Softer than before, less sure. I don't answer, none of us do, because we know something they don't. They hide, they hunt, they eat, but they depend on us staying predictable, and we are not anymore. The town still exists. Smaller, stranger, relive. And as long as we remember, as long as we teach, the rules before they're needed, the night doesn't win. It only waits.